Hi everyone, this is Mama Rogers, and as somebody requested here, I decided to do a series on the tabernacle. We're going to start from the beginning. The tabernacle was designed by God after a pattern in heaven, and God instructed Moses to build the tabernacle. So we're going to read a few scriptures to give us the setting for this construction. Exodus chapter 19, verses 3 to 6 says, And Moses went up unto God, and the Lord called unto him out of the mountain, saying, Thus shalt thou say to the house of Israel, our house of Jacob, and tell the children of Israel, Ye have seen what I did unto the Egyptians, and how I bare you on eagle's wings, and brought you unto myself. Now therefore, if you will obey my voice indeed, and keep my covenant, then shall ye be a peculiar treasure unto me above all people. For all the earth is mine, and ye shall be unto me a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. And these are the words which thou shalt speak to the children of Israel. So Moses had been at the mount of, or on the mount of God before, and he met God there at the burning bush. He received the commandment from God to go get his people out of Egypt. So in this setting, Moses had accomplished his mission to bring them to Mount Sinai, the Mount of God, where Moses had been before. And now God tells Moses that he wants the children of Israel to be his special people, his peculiar treasure above all nations in the earth. And if there was a stipulation, if they would obey his voice and keep the covenant, then they would be his special people. Okay, and where did this happen? It happened right there at the foot of Mount Sinai, where Moses met God. In the first place, this mount was called the Mount of God. If you remember in Genesis, no, was that in Exodus? Pardon me, in the beginning chapters of Exodus, Moses went to the Mount of God. So Israel was to be his peculiar people. They were called out of Egypt. They were set apart from other nations around, and they were to follow his commandments and keep the covenant. And if they did, they would be treasured by God. So we are going to find while they are at the foot of Mount Sinai, after they agreed to keep the covenant, they said, Yes, Moses, we are going to do what God asked us to do. So then God was going to reveal himself to them, and all of this happens on Mount Sinai. Here we have a picture of Mount Sinai. It is located in the Arabian Peninsula. Some biblical scholars and archaeologists have placed the mount on the southern tip of the Sinai Peninsula, but even Paul in Galatians tells us that Mount Sinai is in Arabia, not at the traditional place the Bible scholars located this mount. So anyway, this mount is identified as Mount Sinai, and there are some documentaries on YouTube which actually show that the rocks on the top of the mountain are burned. They're discolored. And we are going to see that when God came down to the mountain, um, it was filled with smoke and fire. It was a terrifying sight. In fact, it was so scary that um, that the people did not want to uh, meet with God for themselves. So actually, and I'm here on Exodus 25, but we are actually still on Exodus 19. So I recommend that you read chapter 19 to understand the setting. And of course, I'm not going to read the whole chapter, but we're going to take some passages, verses 10 to 13. Um, it is God, let me see. And the Lord said unto Moses, Go unto the people and sanctify them today and tomorrow, and let them wash their clothes. So people had to prepare themselves before God was able to come down to the mount to meet with them. Okay, so they had to wash their clothes and prepare themselves. They couldn't just appear the way they wanted to. A washing was even required there. Of course, we understand today that the washing refers to, well, mainly baptism, okay, overall, but it also refers to our need for sanctification and preparation to meet the Lord. So, verse 11, and be ye ready against the third day, for the third day the Lord will come down in the sight of all the people upon Mount Sinai. Here again we have uh, the third day, which means, well, Jesus rose on the third day. This is actually an indication, it's a pattern that God reveals himself on the third day. He is speaking about Jesus. And when we study the Bible, we will find all of the types and shadows and patterns. Everything refers really to Jesus Christ and the overall plan that God had in mind from the beginning of the world. So God said, wash yourself, and on the third day I will reveal myself. I will come down on Mount Sinai to meet you. And you shall set bounds unto the people round about, saying, Take heed to yourself that you go not up into the mount, or touch the border of it. Whosoever toucheth the mount shall be surely put to death. There shall not a hand touch it, but he shall surely be stoned or shot through. Whether it be beast or man, it shall not live. When the trumpet sounded long, then they shall come up. He's speaking about Moses. Moses is coming up when the trumpet sounds. So there was a need for washing, separation, and then God makes it very clear that the mount is holy and the people cannot approach the mount. It is it is an indication that God is holy and he is separated. It is also going back to the Garden of Eden when God sent Adam and Eve out of the Garden of Eden. There was a separation, and there was a separation which was enforced by a cherubim with a flaming sword. Adam and Eve were not able to go back to the meeting place with God. Ever since they had been defiled by sin, there was a separation between God and man. And so we see that separation, even though God claimed the children of Israel to be his people and he wanted to dwell among them, there was still a separation that needed to be dealt with. And the only way that the children of Israel were fit to be his people was through a series of rituals, which were not really rituals, but they all pointed to the work of Jesus Christ. Okay, they were like a type and a shadow, a natural concept that we might understand, which would in reality, in the end, play out in heavenly places in Jesus Christ. So God is holy, and he says, "Be ye holy, for I am holy." And certainly the children of Israel were not holy. It was proven over and over again. Well, they were not holy in themselves, okay? So they murmured, they complained, they saw the miracles, they turned away, they worshipped idols, they did all of that. So in themselves, they were not holy. So something had to be done, okay? And even though, like I said, God wanted to meet with them, he desired his people to be his peculiar treasure, there was still that separation that had to be dealt with. All right, so this is the Mount Sinai, the experience on Mount Sinai in chapter 19 actually shows the idea or what the tabernacle was all about. There was a separation of sin. It showed God and his power and his glory. It said that people would not be able to approach him. They had to perform certain rituals which were not rituals but types and shadows of what God had in mind before they could actually approach him, because the people were sinful. Okay, so once the people said, yes, we want to be his people, we will keep the covenant, so God now proceeds to instruct Moses to build the tabernacle. And the point here is Mount Sinai is sort of, it gives us an indication what the tabernacle is all about. It talks about the holiness of God and the separation between God and man, and the need for a person, in this case Moses, to become the intermediator between God and man. So, and we know that God had in mind to dwell among the people. He wanted to be there, and their destiny was the promised land. So they would not stay at the foot of Mount Sinai forever. The plan was to take them to the promised land, and God was actually going to go with them to the promised land. Okay? And therefore, his presence transferred from Mount Sinai into the tabernacle. That's the idea. And yet, the tabernacle still is holy and separate. Okay, so all of the instructions that we read about the tabernacle bring forth this idea. The tabernacle is holy and separate. So, and here in Exodus 25, Moses receives the instructions on how to go about building the tabernacle. And let's read. And the Lord spake unto Moses, saying, Speak unto the children of Israel, that they bring me an offering of every man that giveth it willingly with his heart. Ye shall take my offering. And this is the offering which ye shall take of them: gold, silver, and brass, blue and purple, scarlet, fine linen, goat's hair, ram skin dyed red, badger skin, shittim wood, I don't know if I say it correctly, oil for the light, spices for the anointing oil, and for sweet incense, onyx stones, and stones to be set in the ephod, and in the breastplate, and let them make me a sanctuary that I may dwell among them, according to all that I show thee, after the pattern of the tabernacle, the pattern of all the instruments thereof, even so shall ye make it. So God revealed himself to Moses when he went up. So he showed him natural things, and Moses had an understanding about the things of God. And so he was able to transfer the instructions that God gave him into construction that people would be able to build for God to travel among them. Okay, so God humbled himself and traveled among the people. That's the whole point. He humbled himself to dwell in a tent, in a restricted tent. Okay? So, what is a sanctuary and why does God require a sanctuary? I think we already answered that. God is holy. I mean, there had to be a separation since the beginning with Adam and Eve. Sin could not dwell with God. There had to be a separation. It is not that God does not love us, but there are boundaries. That's where the idea of boundaries come from. You cannot allow a person, for example, to overstep their boundaries and attack you. There are boundaries. So God has boundaries. And so, what is a sanctuary? There are some definitions in the Hebrews. There are two words, depending on how the scholars would write it. There are different ideas, and I'm not going to try to say it. Mikdash, maybe? There you go, I said it. And it comes from a Hebrew word. It means a consecrated thing or place, especially a palace, sanctuary, whether of Jehovah or idols. That's a sanctuary. So all the gods of the nations had their own temples, right? We know that. Asylum, a special place, a chapel, a hallowed part, a holy place, or a sanctuary. And then the Greek translation of the Old Testament says hagiazo. It's a holy place, to make holy, a ceremonially consecrated place. Okay? So here we go. So why does God require a sanctuary? Well, let's go back to the Garden of Eden, right? We have explained it already. God expelled his people because of his holiness. Sin could not dwell with him. And after the fall of Adam and Eve, they were sent into the wilderness outside of the garden, okay? Outside of that beautiful place. They now had to live in the wilderness. They were separated by a cherub with a flaming sword. It was impossible for them to go back to the garden because there was a sword waiting for them. Death was waiting for them. The purpose was that they should not live forever in a corrupt state. By choosing a people and creating a holy place, God is seeking to restore fellowship with humanity. And the whole plan unfolds over millennia, okay? Thousands of years, not only centuries, like thousands of years, the plan of God. God was very patient to bring his plan to pass so that all the people in the world would be blessed through the promise he made to Abraham. It goes back to Abraham. So God told Moses to create a sanctuary after a specific pattern. We can see the pattern on Mount Sinai. We can have an indication of it. And here is a model of the tabernacle. So it is a tent with a wall of curtains and hangings around it. It has three parts, which is the outer area, which is where you see the priests and the animals and the altar uh, in. And then it has an inner sanctuary, which is called the holy place and the holiest of holies, which was covered up and it was not accessible to the people. So here's another image. And then here is a diagram of the tabernacle that Moses was instructed to build. So we have basically uh, two areas as a ratio of 2 to 1, I believe, right? This is 2 to 1. And we have the outer court, which doesn't have a roof. It contains a brazen altar, a brazen laver with water. That's where on the altar is where all the sacrifices were burned. And then we have the inner place, which is the holy place. It is separated into two sections. Only certain people were allowed to go into the holy place, this place right here. And then we have the Holy of Holies, and that was separated by a big heavy veil, and nobody was allowed to go there. This is where God would come down. Moses was allowed to meet God there, but after the priesthood was established, Aaron was allowed to go in there once a year with by following specific rituals. Okay? So we find in the holy place is the candlestick, the altar of incense, and a table with what the King James Version calls shewbread. I haven't figured it out. It's the bread that the priests would eat. And then over here we have the Ark of the Covenant with the mercy seat. So that's a diagram of the tabernacle. We have a gate, the outer gate. The people of Israel would be around there. Then this is the door of the tabernacle, and this is the veil which separates the holy place from the most holy place. All right, so look at this. God told Moses to receive an offering. Okay, the people in the wilderness had to give an offering. If you remember, when the people left Egypt, they were told to borrow gold and silver and whatever the Egyptians had to uh, before they left Egypt. And the Egyptians gladly gave it to them. So God had made provisions for the people, and now the people were to use it, not for whatever they thought they wanted to use it on. I mean, pretty sure that eventually they could use it for their own purposes as well. But the idea was that they would actually provide for the tabernacle. All of the provisions for the tabernacle and for the service of the tabernacle came from the people. Okay? So the people of God were to supply the material, substance to create a tabernacle. And the call was to those who were willing to give. I put the get in there, right? That's who we are. We want to get. But God loves a cheerful giver. Okay, and he knows. So the materials to be used were very specific. The people were to give gold, silver, brass cloth made of linen, blue, purple, scarlet, and of goat's hair, skins, woods, precious stones, oil, spices, and incense. All of that was going to be used for the tabernacle. And so I have spoken for 25 minutes. I will upload another video shortly. This is enough for section 1. So go ahead, read chapters 19 and chapters 21, or if you like, start reading the whole book of Exodus, because it's not, everything is related, okay? So the whole Bible is a complete story. It's just not disconnected ideas. So the people came out of Egypt, and God wants to dwell among them, and He is creating a space to go with them. God humbled Himself, the mighty God of heaven, who came down on Mount Sinai with smoke and burning, so much that the people were afraid to talk to him. They said to Moses, "No, no, no, Moses, we don't want God to speak to us. Let God speak to you, and then you tell us what to do." The sight was so terrifying, right? So God humbled himself to dwell in that square holy of holies. Why? Because he wanted to be with his people, and he wants to be with you and me. And let's see how the plan unfolds. I will create another video as soon as I can. And well, let me know if you enjoyed this part. God bless you guys. See y'all.